I just look kind of hard. And I wanted to look soft and pretty. I had my nose broken when I was a child. You can see it's leaning this way. I turn my head this way. You can see it's bent. So normally I keep my head this way, and it makes my nose look a lot shorter. When you look straight away and you really look at it, you can see it's bent. I had it operated on one time so that I could breathe better, but it didn't do that much good, I don't think. So, it's what it is. That's one of the new sayings that I like pretty good. It is what it is. I never did get into that anywho thing. I thought that was real silly, but you know, last time I did a video that was what I will consider my introduction to my life story, Woman Once Removed. It kind of skimmed over everything. So I'd kind of like to go into more detail, and I would consider this chapter 1. I was born. You know, I complained about growing up with the way kids treated me in school. Now, that was not a good experience. Not after I got, you know, past 3rd or 4th grade. But my life growing up as a child in my family was pretty good. Now, if I had not had my gender condition, I would have had an idealistic childhood. Growing up in a predominantly German background family, farming family, it was a very good, clean, wholesome, Mayberry type of life. And I loved it. And had I been born the way I should have been born, I would have lived right now in that community and had children and grandchildren and still been living right within that community. Because I loved it. I really did. I loved the history of my family. My grandmother, she babysat me a lot during the summer because my father helped his father, which was my grandfather, on the farm a lot during his off time. And during the summertime, whenever I was out of school, my grandmother, she really didn't babysit. She just let me sit with her, and I got to learn so much from her. You know, she told me family history, showed me pictures, talked to me about her days growing up as a young woman, and I loved it. You know, I loved being with her. And I lost her when I was 15, and that was really hard for me because we were really close. And I spent a lot of time there, so my cousins would come to visit. They would come with their parents, and we would hang out. We would play house, of course. I would be the mother. But they played along with me. You know, I didn't have them making fun of me. You know, they knew me from the time our eyes were opened. And so they knew how I was, and they accepted it. And if there was any way for us to get some old clothes to put on, of course, they had on women's clothes. And when we would go to other people's houses, I would sneak and get in the closet, and I would come out in big hats and high heels and stuff. Everybody, if they had a camera, they'd take pictures of me. So I've got pictures of me dressing up since I was, you know, just little. So it wasn't something that was shocking to my family. After I got a certain age, they wanted me to stop it. And it was sort of an embarrassment that it continued to go on, especially for my brothers. My brothers became very embarrassed over it. I remember sometimes they would have their friends over, and we had a full basement with a den with a a fireplace down there and a kitchen and all that. And they would have these parties like with all their friends in the basement. And you know me. I had to dress up, honey, and go down there and come skipping down the steps in something of my mama's. And for my brothers, it was an embarrassment. But the boys loved it, you know. They yahooed and laughed because I was entertaining to them, but it embarrassed my brothers, and they never got past that. My oldest brother, who's 12 years older than me, he says the reason we have never been close because of the age difference. He said, but when we lived next door in the trailer when we first got married, him and his wife Judy, he said, when you come over there, you wouldn't speak to me, you just go straight back and start talking to Judy. So after this it went on, I said, well, ta-da, what does that tell you? That tells you that I was a girl and I felt more comfortable talking to the girls than I was talking to boys. I had nothing to say to a boy. I had nothing in common with a farming man. I didn't know what to say to him. I felt uncomfortable. So I went and talked to his wife, and when the babies came along, I was playing with the babies. But he was saying that was the reason he and I did not have a relationship. But we have tried since then to develop a relationship. He has nothing against me, he says, and he's been very nice to me. He's a retired Lutheran minister now. But my other brother, the one that's only 6 years older than me, he doesn't have anything to do with me at all. In his eyes and his opinion, I died the day I had surgery. And that was very hurtful because I was really close to him growing up. Even though he was always a bully, he was always picking on me. He was my big brother, and I loved him dearly. And I've never really gotten over that hurt. The hurt that he couldn't be supportive of me going through all the hell I was going through. All he could see was what I did and that I was doing it against my family and my parents. He said he couldn't forgive the way I had hurt my parents. I had embarrassed and humiliated my parents by coming out with who I really was and taking care of it. Even though I tried to be as dignified as I could, but he could not accept that. And one thing that did put a really damper on anything ever being right with us is that his oldest son died from a cerebral hemorrhage. And even though I went home to the wake and I put my hair back in a ponytail, wore no makeup, and wore just a basic shirt and pants. They were girls, but they looked very unisex. I tried to be very respectful, but his funeral was set for the day of my first surgery, which was my breast augmentation. And I'd already paid for this, and money was not easy to come by. And I knew I would lose a big part of it, if not all of it, if I canceled the day before. You know, and it was a good excuse to cancel, but I chose not to cancel. I didn't think he really wanted me there anyway. He didn't act like he did. He didn't say 3 words to me the whole time I was there. So, but my mother always thought that that was one of the reasons that that rift could never be repaired between he and I. And I say, if him or any of his family ever watched this, that I'm really sorry that that took place. I was young. At that time, I was 19. I just didn't know what to do. And if he had come to me and talked to me and said that he needed me there, I would have been there. But he didn't. And I went ahead and went with my life. And the outcome was he never wanted anything else to do with me. So he was very angry at me for hurting my parents and the family, he said. But I was very lucky that after I had surgery that my grandfather welcomed me back into the family. Now that was a good thing. I had not seen him for 2 years, and while I was going through this, because the family, he was in his 90s, the family did not want me subjecting him to that. And so I didn't. So after 2 years, he asked where I was, because I had went and lived with my grandfather to, help take care of him, wash his clothes, cook him his meals, when my grandmother passed away at 15. So for a year I lived there. And so he was close to me. He knew me. And so he said, what's the deal with this? So they decided to tell him, that I had changed my sex and that I was living as a woman. He said, tell her I want to see her. So I went. I took my best friend with me, and as soon as I walked up on his back porch and he opened the door, he rushed out and hugged me so tight. And he said, hello, gal. It's been a long time. Of course I cried. My best friend cried. It was about the best time of my whole life to have my grandfather not only ask about me, but call me gal. And he never slipped up, ever. He called me Diana, and she and her for the rest of his life. He always wanted me there. He always wanted me at family reunions and family dinners. And Christmas time was always at my grandpa's house. And some of y'all have seen pictures of me that was taken at my grandpa's house when I was little and I was dressed up as a girl with my baby dolls. So, it meant a lot to me to be able to go back there. And I went every year until he died. He was almost 100 when he finally passed away. So I was lucky to have him in my life. And I was lucky to have my parents, because after my surgery, they were very supportive. So after I had surgery, my doctor, who was Dr. Stanley Biber in Trinidad, Colorado, the sex change capital of the world, at the time it was called that. But he got on the phone and he said, Mrs. Beaver, my last name was Beaver, he said, I just was calling to let you know that your little girl is doing just fine. She turned to my dad and said, this is the doctor in Colorado. He says your little girl's doing just fine. And from that moment on, my parents never slipped up. My parents always called me Diana and always called me she, because, it was over, it was done. So they supported me in what it was. And they always wanted me to be part of the family and come back anytime that I would. And my father, he wanted me to live there. He said, I don't see any reason you need to live in Charlotte, North Carolina. There's no reason to live in a big city like that. You weren't born and raised like that. You just need to live here. And I did stay there while I was convalescing, but he didn't want me to move back out. But I needed to. I needed my life and my space and be able to do whatever I felt like I needed to do, because I knew he had his house rules and you had to live by his house rules. And yeah, that's the way it was. So I did have supportive family, supportive parents, and aunts and uncles and my grandfather. I did have a lot of support. And I will never give anything for that at all. And so my young years as Diana were extremely good. They started to unravel as the older generation began to pass away. And I started losing that support system within my family. And it was hard. You know, I have some cousins that are supportive, some more than others. But, you know, it's still not the support system that I had with with the older generation. They were steadfast. They were there. So, I had it good. Yeah, I can't complain about that. You know, everything else was just what I did or did not do with my own life. You know, we all have this monkey on our back that maybe keeps us from rising to our full potential. Sometimes that's hard, but it's just something we have to work out in our own minds. You know, I know now there were a lot of things I should have done. There were opportunities that I let go. Maybe I was scared. Maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe I thought the time would come again. You know, and it didn't. So I say live your life, honey. Live your life to its fullest. If an opportunity comes your way, take it, because it may never come back again. You know, do everything that you've ever wanted to do in your life. You know, don't settle and try to just live a certain way. Try to get your dreams, to try to do the things that you've always wanted to do. And don't look back. Don't look back on your mistakes. If you make mistakes, just keep going. You know? Another thing I wanted to mention is when I was a kid, I grew up on a farm, and I had a horse. Her name was Beauty. I loved Beauty. She lived to be 35 years old. And for that reason, I mean, all my cousins, they loved to come and ride my horse with me. So I never had a need for company because I always had company. Weekends, you know, I had people visiting. We were playing, having a good time, you know, until everybody gets into their teens and they start doing their thing. But when I was a kid, I had a really good life. If I could have been born natural female, I could have not asked for anything any better, you know. My dad was a grumpy country man, you know. He had a hot temper, and him and my mama fussed a lot, but he wasn't a drinker. He wasn't a whoremonger, you know. He was a hard-working man, and I loved him dearly, and I miss him. I miss him just about as much as I missed my mama, but not quite as much as I do my grandpa. My grandpa was great. He was a wonderful fella. We should have known him. Okay, I'm not going to make this one too awfully long. So I think I touched bases on what I was going to talk about, you know, my grandma and my cousins and all that. Because once I listened to my video, I realized I kind of skimmed over some things about my childhood that I wanted to add, you know, because I did have a good childhood. So I'll come back again with chapter 2 of Woman Once Removed. Good night.